So we have more whale processing, just like in Moby Dick, not quite in as much detail. Slightly different results from eating the whale. If you remember that Flask Stub just enjoyed his whale steak. But apparently the whale tongue isn't quite so good, or at least they found it too much tasting like whale oil to be palatable. So they decide, okay, we're going to set up another colony of sorts on the island where we found the whale, which makes a lot of sense because there aren't the monkeys there. There are other things on there, so that could be a nice, safe place to set things up. Give them a place to fall back to. Give them a second source of food if some danger befalls them on their main island. This is one of the cases where they have to be prepared because if the grocery store you go to burns down, there's another grocery store 5 miles away, and you just go to that one. But in their case, if their plantation burns down, if they lose their primary source of food, that's it. They're out of it. So they're setting up a backup place where they have animals living that they can go and harvest the animals. They have trees that they're planting there so that they have another source of food, so that they have a second place to live. Once again, the fish come and they capture and prepare them, much like they did the previous year. And then they see a boa constrictor. Now, boa constrictors are some of the largest snakes in the world, and yeah, they do get up to 30 feet. And yes, they can eat a donkey whole. They will take it, they will crush it, they will swallow it. I have not seen this happen personally. I have seen pictures of it. There have been some boa constrictors that were released by people. They were held as pets in the US, and they were released into the Everglades. And they've been fighting sort of a back and forth battle with the alligators, which are native to the Everglades. And sometimes the alligators eat the boa constrictors, and sometimes the boa constrictors eat the alligators. And sometimes they both die in the process of fighting each other. But so boa constrictors are an invasive species in North America. So, if you ever get one as a pet, do not let it go. Though, I guess in Nebraska, they don't have much luck. Talked about rattlesnakes and the island with rattlesnakes in Lake Superior. Now, Lake Superior is on the northern border of the US, and it gets very cold up there. And snakes are reptiles, and they're cold-blooded, which means that they don't produce their own body heat. So if you go outside, your body ramps up its metabolism, it burns food faster, and it keeps you warm. Now, snakes can't do that. But what snakes do is they form something called a Hibernaculum. And that's where you have a whole bunch of snakes, sometimes of different breeds, and they all get together in one giant ball of snakes. We're talking like dozens, hundreds of snakes, maybe even thousands of snakes, all clumped together in a little cave. And they're just like cheek and jowl on top of each other. And it's the mass of bodies is enough to keep the whole cluster of snakes warm. And it's called a hibernaculum. And there's stories about people stumbling on them and just screaming. It's like, oh my goodness, snakes everywhere, I'm going to die. But when the snakes are in the hibernaculum, they're kind of cold usually. They usually only do that in the winter. So in the winter, they cluster together to try and keep warm. And then when it warms up, they leave each other. And some snakes eat other snakes. And so you may have natural enemies just cuddled together for warmth. And then when it warms up, everyone goes their own ways and says that won't happen again. But it does in the winter. Most of the snakebite remedies are not good listed here. The current best practice is wrap the area loosely and wrap it more tightly, slightly up and down from the snake bite. So if you get bitten in the leg, you wrap around that, and then you wrap up and down a little bit. and try not to move the limb and try not to move around too much, and then get to a hospital. Because when you get to a hospital, they can apply the proper antivenom and perhaps save your life. Once the snake bites in. It's kind of hard to remove. There's snake bite kits that have these little suction things that can extract the venom. Don't just try sucking it out, because that's a good way to get two people poisoned and dead. One of those things where it's like, hey, we'll do this, and it's just the absolute wrong thing to do. So it's bind the wound, get to the hospital, get a good description of the snake. Now, one thing that they had very right is that poisonous snakes tend to have a wider head. So you can tell the poisonous snakes by having a wider head. They tend to have a triangle-shaped head because they need the extra room for the venom glands. And if you have a snake's whose head is just like smooth into the body, that's usually not poisonous, but they can still bite, and that will still be painful. Some snakes don't actually have fully developed fangs. They don't have hollow fangs. They just have like a groove for the poison to go down. A lot of snakes have the ability to decide whether or not to inject venom. So if you have a rattlesnake, the rattlesnake can bite you, but not inject venom. Just kind of as a warning, go away. Next time I'll kill you. And so what happens is you have what's called a dry bite, where they bite and maybe a little bit of poison comes out, but not a whole lot. So that's why immature snakes can actually be more dangerous than mature snakes, because, even though you have this 8-foot rattlesnake with these massive poison glands, they can just bite in and kill 20 horses worth of poison. It'll bite but not deliver much poison. Well, you have this little baby 2.5-foot rattler, 3-foot rattler, and it hasn't learned the poison control yet, and it just bites and injects everything. And then it's harmless for a few days because it lost all its poison, and the big snake can just bite and bite and bite and inject poison when it wants to. One thing that they do with snakes is they do something called milking them, where they take a cup and they take a sheet of cloth or paper or plastic, and they put the plastic on top of the cup, stretch it tight, and they take the snake and they jam its fangs down into the cup. And to the snake, that feels like skin. And it just starts injecting the poison, injecting the poison, injecting the poison. You collect it in a cup. It's like, well, what do you do with a cup of snake poison? You inject it into a horse. And you're like, why do you put the poison into the horse? Because if you put a little bit of poison into the horse will release antibodies to attack the poison. And it's just a little bit of poison, not enough to hurt the horse. Well, enough to hurt the horse a little bit, not enough to kill the horse. And then you can extract those antibodies and use it to treat people who've been bitten by snakes. Horses are the classic example. I don't know if they've done it with any other animals, but horses are the classic thing of, and they actually use that similar thing to treat other diseases, where you give the horse a little bit of the disease, and the horse makes antibodies. You collect the antibodies, you inject it into the person, and it cures a person. So that's used to treat typhoid. They probably have more modern treatments than that, but that was the classic treatment, where it was the horse gets a little bit sick, you take the plasma from the horse and inject into the person, and the person gets better. But anyway, so you do that with snake venom too, or they used to do that with snake venom. I'm sure they have modern techniques of recombinant bacteria that make the anti-venom stuff, but that's the way they did it classically. Nowadays, we have like this magic science fiction technology, which is just absolutely incredible. But for the Swiss Family Robinson, if they were bit by snakes, yeah, they could wrap it. They could sit down and rest and hope that the poison spreads slowly enough that their body deals with it. So, it would be like the first week. If they survive and they don't get gangrene, probably going to be good. And there's different types of poison. Some snakes have poison that eats the flesh, in which case, they may end up with gangrene on the leg and lose the leg. Others have nerve poison, which causes convulsions or causes paralysis or both. Some snakes have a cardiotoxin, which just shuts down the heart. Some snakes have a combination of all of them. So snakes can be dangerous, but, if you have something like a python or boa constrictor, they can be good pets because, well, they can bite, but they don't usually bite. And because they're constrictors, because they're not venomous, you don't have to worry as much about the bite, and they're less likely to bite. And if you keep them well fed, they tend to be docile. The snake ate the donkey, poor Grizzle, the first named thing to die in the book. Poor Grizzle, and the snake kind of slept. It got tired because it has a lot of digesting to do, and snakes often do that. You feed them and they just kind of lay there for a day as it slowly moves through, and they can often go like a month without eating, but and yeah, they do eat the things whole. Kind of nasty. Your dad had a snake, so you can ask him about snakes and such. And that was about it for this. Oh, the island with the birds, the snakes again. And they said, the pigs got released on the island. This goes back to what I said before. Pigs will eat anything, and pigs can be mighty dangerous. So, pigs on islands full of snakes. It could be that, they hit in the winter where the snakes are slower, and if the snakes are slower and the pigs are mammals. Mammals are warm-blooded, and they will keep moving in the winter, and the snakes, not so much. So if it was the fall or winter, early spring, pigs have a huge edge on the snakes there. Lots of things actually go after snakes. Mongoose. Mongoose are the classic animals to go after snakes. In India, they train mongooses to fight cobras because mongooses have evolved over time to fight cobras because, a mongoose is a small ferret-like thing. And in the wild, one of their primary food sources is snakes. So these things go after snakes naturally, which means that they tend to build up a resistance to snake poison, and they've evolved a resistance for snake poison. So people train them to go after the cobras. And a lot of the cobra things, they actually sew the snake's mouth shut. So that's like a terrible thing to do. It's like they milk the venom, they sew the mouth shut, and then maybe they unsew it once a week or once a month to get the snake. But it's kind of cruel, and a lot of it has to do with the snake's natural behavior of you move. It's not so much that they dance to the music. It's when they play the flute, they wiggle the end back and forth, and so the snake follows the end of the flute. But so that's one of those little tricks that you can find out about, or I guess I just told you about.